Before we get started, I want to let you know that CityCast Chicago is hiring. We're looking for a senior account executive to join our revenue team. We already know you love the podcast and the newsletter, so if you got some sales experience and you know Chicago, you want to help local businesses get their message out to the best audience in the city, you should apply. As you can probably tell, we have a lot of fun over here. You can get all the details, including compensation, at citycast.fm/jobs. Today on CityCast Chicago, what do recent Supreme Court decisions mean for the future of higher ed? Chicago is experiencing increased flood warnings, and we've got an arts-filled weekend for you. Joining me is lead producer Simone Alisea and WBEZ higher ed reporter Lisa Phillip. It's Friday, July 7th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, Simone.
Thanks for having me.
Good morning.
I'm excited to have both of y'all in the building. Before we get started, Malort seems to be in the conversation recently. Not only did CityCast Chicago talk about it, our friends over at Curious City talk about it, and I saw on Twitter that during Drake's sort of after party, somebody tried to get him, or somebody got him to drink some Malort to get the stank face that many people find themselves with. So, Lisa, I got to start with you. Do you have a Malort story? Have you tried it, or have you forced some transplant or newcomer to try it?
I recently moved back about a year ago, and growing up here, I'd never heard of it. And now I'm like hearing all this chatter about it. I got close to trying Malort, but my husband was hanging out with some friends, and they had a bottle open, and I was supposed to be able to try some leftovers. But I guess it got left open outside. It got consumed by ants. So,
So you're still on the haven't done it list.
Yes. But, I think my husband was like, yo, you should be happy those ants drink it. Because
I am so shocked that the ants like Malort. I got to say, I would have thought if I were an animal and I smelled that, I would have run away. There's no way. That's so shocking to me.
That's supposed to keep you out of the yard. I feel that.
Right.
Well, if you take any advice from Simone and I today, maybe just keep pushing it down the road.
Yeah.
If eventually it happens, it will. But keep avoiding it. Keep accidentally leaving it open outside for the ants. Lisa, one of the reasons we brought you in here today is because we've had two really crucial rulings come down from the Supreme Court in the last week that will have major impacts on the future of higher education. One, dealing with affirmative action and using race in admissions. And the other is with Biden's plan to offer student debt relief to millions of Americans. What did the Supreme Court rule last week?
Yeah, so first off with the affirmative action case, basically what they ruled is that these admissions programs at Harvard and UNC Chapel Hill that take into account race. So it's just one factor in an applicant's, application, and in one sense of their identity, personality, academic background. Racial quotas, they haven't been permitted for a few decades now because of a previous Supreme Court ruling. So just like to get that out of the way off the bat. But basically, the Supreme Court then went even further and said, you can't consider race at all in your admissions process at these selective schools. But there are many other selective schools that practice this very similar application process where they consider race. So those schools won't be able to do it either for fear of legal challenges to their processes, right? So now schools are trying to think of ways to sort of compensate for not being able to use that, whether that's considering socioeconomic status or looking at a student's essay. But the ruling leaves a lot up in the air.
And this was another decision split across sort of conservative lines. What did dissenting justices say?
Yeah, so basically they were opposing this idea of a color blind admissions policy in that you're totally disregarding the fact that we live in a country where racism affects every aspect of our society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a very systematic way, education included, right? Like race definitely has an effect on where you've grown up, what kind of schools you went to, how you're viewed by your teachers, your classmates, and what courses you have access to, right? So like in the dissenter's view, it ignores so much of what a person is bringing to the table when they're applying to colleges.
Lisa, I'm curious, what have Illinois institutions, how have they responded or to this ruling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of them, both institutions and then like higher education leaders and politicians, really criticized this ruling and like affirmed their commitment to making institutions more equitable for Black and Latino students, whether or not they actually show that to us in the upcoming months, because like Northwestern and University of Chicago both practice something called legacy admissions, which is one thing, for example, that stands in the way of actually making your campus equitable for all students, because this is a policy that gives preference to the children of alumni. And because these schools didn't let in Black folks, Latino folks, other non-white folks, this policy, because it draws on generational ties, right, continues to exclude students of color. Like there were stats that came out of the Harvard case, and 70% of their legacy admits, so students who are some way related to an alumni, were white. So these are, it's a chunk of seats in an admitted class that gets taken up by students. Maybe they are academically qualified, I don't know, but they got a leg up. So if we're going to really take this idea of a meritocratic system and follow through with it, we now have legal challenges to legacy admissions at Harvard, for example, as of this week in response to last week's ruling. And Northwestern and U Chicago, I'm waiting to see if they drop their policies.
You and me both.
As one step towards making these places more accessible, equitable for all students.
I mean, in addition to what that ruling means and how it will increase challenges for Black and brown people trying to get into college, another Supreme Court ruling sort of, continues the burden on people who've already left college with, in some cases, like myself, mountains of student debt. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So Biden last fall had proposed this program to relieve up to $20,000 in federal student loans. And the Supreme Court basically ruled that Biden didn't have the authority to award this relief to students. So you have students who had applied, like in Illinois, more than 1.5 million Illinois residents had applied for this program.
Yep.
I think both me and Jacoby are in that.
Yep. I was like, including hand raised.
Yes, exactly. So many people saw this as a lifeline, right? Like people are still recovering from the pandemic. Prices are still high. And then you have people who've had relief because of the payment pause, which of course is ending this fall. And like, I know I've talked to a lot of people who were like, this $10,000 or $20,000 would have wiped out a big chunk of my debt. And, I even talked to someone who was like, basically made a decision about going back to school for a graduate degree based on this. And now he's still on the hook for his $20,000+ repayments. So yeah, what can I say? I mean, Biden is now looking at other ways to get relief to students, but we'll see. We'll see if that comes through for us.
I mean, can we all just take a moment to really process what the Supreme Court has ruled on in just the last couple of years, the direct impact that it has had on our lives in a way that, you know, presidential elections, our governor, like even our local officials, like, of course, the policy decisions they make have an impact on us. But to see everything from student loans to reproductive rights to affirmative action be sort of quickly dismantled in a matter of years, and in many ways there feels like there's no recourse to these decisions, right? These people, they stay here, you know, until retirement or the bucket, and it really feels in some ways like we're only getting started with the potential this court has to sort of undo long held sort of laws in this country.
You mentioned sort of like the fact that these decisions are having this very like tangible effect in our daily lives, right? I think about the students here in Chicago who are maybe getting this message that college isn't for them.
Loud and clear.
Right. Because of student debt, because of rising costs, just because of admissions processes that sometimes seem unfair, right, to certain students. Especially students of color. And I think both the student debt rulings and the affirmative action, one of the most impactful things will just be the message it sends, I think, to students who are thinking about college and whether it's for them or not.
Over the weekend and throughout this week, Chicago has seen more and more rain. And if you've been paying attention to your phone, that means more and more flood warnings. Simone, can you catch us up?
The big one was, of course, was Sunday, where Chicago set records for how much rain was coming in. We have had more rain in July than we had in May and June combined.
I've got caught out in it 3 times now. Like I have pictures of walking on like the lake, trying to like scurry back yesterday in the gray cloud that moved slowly over the city. It was a very somehow beautiful yet terrifying sight to see out there yesterday.
I spent several days drying out a book that I had in my backpack when I got caught in it on Sunday. You know, the rain on Sunday led to 311 saw more than 2,000 complaints. Nearly 27,000 people were left without power. And then we had storms on Wednesday as well that weren't quite as severe, but like, you know, it was already pretty wet. And so we saw more flooding, more down trees, and it's just really rough out there. There's also this other thing that I thought was really interesting because some of the outlying suburbs, places like Cicero and Berwyn, got even more rain. And there's a little bit of conflict between Cicero officials and the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, who sort of deals with the water flow, right? Chicago is a very complex system of flowing water and making sure the river doesn't overflow. We don't get sewage into our drinking water and all that good stuff. And, you know, Cicero sort of accused the Water Reclamation District of sort of slow rolling some things. And they basically said, like, you know, if we drop these gates too quickly, it will create a tidal wave on Lake Michigan that will destroy the coast of Chicago. So yeah, it's this very rough, sort of complicated period for homeowners, especially. I think this has just been a very, very stressful week of basement flooding.
No, I've had friends who've had flooding. I've seen the videos of cars getting caught out by the Austin exit. I mean, the manhole geysers just sort of spewing up.
I literally thought it was Buckingham Fountain. When I first saw like the video came across my feed, I thought it was a video of Buckingham Fountain. And then I was like, that's a manhole in the middle of the street. Nope.
Definitely not the fountain. I had a few neighbors who were dealing with flooded basements, and a friend who lives right behind me had like 5 or 6 inches of water in her basement, you know?
Jeez. We lost a lot of family photos when I was in high school because our basement flooded, and it flooded to like waist deep. Man, we lost so many photos, old videos, Nancy Drew books, like the originals.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, that's no good.
Lisa, you had a recent sit down with the president of Chicago State University, who is going into or just passing their 5th year with the school. Can you
That's
tell us
right.
a little bit
Yeah.
about that conversation?
Yeah. It was a good one. President Z. Scott has had a year. So Chicago State is a really interesting place in that it serves a majority Black student population, and it's the only college in the state that does so. It's in the Roseland neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, and I got to spend some time there earlier this year because they had a faculty strike, and I got to particularly follow a professor and a student who she transferred to Chicago State, not totally knowing what she wanted to do, but she knew she liked chemistry, and she had Valerie Goss as her chemistry professor, and it was she was like, this is the first time I'm seeing a Black woman as teaching chemistry, and it set her on this path. Now she's heading to do a doctorate in chemistry at University of Chicago. So just meeting the student, I was like, what? This school? Like, I need to spend some more time there. And I also wanted to catch up with the president because she faced criticism during the strike, of course. I mean, that happens a lot. There was a lot of acrimony there. But I thought she was just made this amazing point about this whole conversation of whether or not college degrees are worth it. Especially here in Illinois, we've seen the public funding for higher education is so much lower than what it used to be a couple decades ago, right? And then these universities are having to charge more tuition to sort of compensate for that. And that's really had very disparate impacts on different kinds of students in the state. And so President Z. Scott, to bring this back to her, she's basically like, the message isn't that college isn't for everyone. The message is that we need to make it for everyone. Whether or not she's, successful, she's definitely done some things at Chicago State to both recruit and retain students. Like, one of the things they've done is implement the RISE program, which gives free tuition to incoming freshmen for their first year and provides sort of an academic on-ramping almost over the summer before they start to kind of get them the skills they need to be successful in college. She's just on this mission to get more Black students onto college campus and get them through it too, because she's the percentage of Black students enrolled in college in Illinois has dropped by more than a third since about 2010. So that's a huge drop, and it has very real implications both for their students, their communities, and for the state as a whole. As President Scott pointed out, college is still bringing people more job opportunities, more.
It still remains a ladder in many cases to more opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, and I understand that even for myself, with all of the debt I take on, I am, I'm grateful for my time, but I do have those days when I look at that number and I am still asking myself, what is the trade-off? Sometimes I'm like, man, whatever got in City Cab Chicago, I could have just done some storytelling on the side. Maybe they still would have reached out to me if I didn't have the degrees, but maybe then I wouldn't have been prepared.
Yeah.
But if we don't make it more cost effective, right? If we don't see that there's going to be relief, that people are going to, people are going to be able to take access to programs and free money and grants to get into college, I don't see that turnaround in terms of those numbers.
I know. I'm starting this project of talking to student loan borrowers and reflecting on whether they think it was worth it or not. And I think it's so complicated just by the sheer expense, and not even the financial burden of it, but now we're, dealing with this bureaucratic mess. So yeah, I think what Scott had to say was basically we're asking the wrong question. It's not is college worth it? It's who is college for right now? And what do we need to do to make it for everyone?
Yeah. And also, what is the, like, on a more fundamental too, what is the purpose of it? Like, is the purpose to churn out, people who can do these high-end jobs? Is that the ideal? Or is there an objective use to just higher ed and to learning more and to learning from the smartest people around? There's an idealist in me that likes that element of it, right? Of getting to just learn as much as you can about a bunch of different things. But very tough to calculate in terms of what's going on.
Yeah, was my philosophy degree worth 40 racks? And I don't know. I might have studied some a little bit different. Some a little bit
President Scott had something to say about that too. She was like, because I think so often this very conversation gets focused on like STEM degrees and like, are we churning out workers, right? But she was like, a liberal arts degree, if you learn to write and think critically, like that ability is never getting taken away from you. And this is the idealist in her, I'm sure, but there will always be a job for you. And of course.
Let's end it on that note with a collective shrug and a.
The idealist in me also, like you said, the opportunity to learn from just the smartest people in the room, the ability to be surrounded by other peers who are like pursuing their curiosity and just like the college experience, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't trade that part for the world. Let's not bring the listener down too much, right? They sitting there thinking about loans. Is they gonna be able to pay for this for the next generation? What's the air quality?
And their basement's flooded.
Their basement flooded. So we gotta make sure we leave people with some good news. Simone, what is some good news to get the people through the day, the weekend, the 10 years working in public service to hopefully get their debt relieved?
Get that relief. I'm always here talking about whatever I've got going on in my life. And I think the thing that always brings me good news is a little bit of comedy. And I just want to shout out this show that I saw last week at the Red Room, which is in West Rogers Park, kind of on Western, right next to Candlelight Diner. And I had never been there. And it's literally just like a room in a storefront. It's very small. But I got invited to this comedy show by my Uber driver. And he's Sudanese. And he was like, I want to do this show. I saw this thing when I was in Egypt where they brought members of the audience and they like had them work with the comedians in the back and then come up and like do like one joke, do like 30 seconds or do like a minute. And he's like, I really want to do that. And I was like, well, that I want to see. Like that, I need to see that happen. And I did it. It was super fun. It was great. And the two people who went up were actually delightful. And they told a really good joke. And on top of it, our friend, Dario Durham from the 77 Flavors of Chicago podcast, who was just on the show last week.
Shout out Dario.
Was also performing and also had a great set. So it was just a good time all around, a great little spot. When they let you out not onto the street, but into another bar, which like where people were like playing pool and like had nothing to do with the comedy show. They just were there. So yeah, it was just like a weird, funny Chicago experience. Like you're in an Uber and all of a sudden you're at a comedy show and then you meet a friend. Like, it's great. It was a great time and just quintessential Chicago summer, in my opinion.
I love Simone's good news all the time. Lisa, what is some good news?
Well, maybe I'll try some Malort this weekend. Is that good news or bad news?
Nah, that's bad news, G. That's bad news. Nah, stay away.
Okay, so I'll stay away from that. I'm really excited for this movie that just came out, Joyride, because it's like this super raunchy comedy with an Asian American cast, and I'm Indian American. I feel like I grew up, as so many of us did, with these characters that were always like nerdy. That's fine. I'm a nerd, but like quiet, docile. You just like,
Mm-hmm.
go through life with your head down, right? Like, but this really flaunts all of that, this movie. And like, I think I saw the trailer, which is the scene where there are two little Asian American girls in the playground, and this like kid approaches them and is like, oh, like no, some sort of racial slur, like no ching chongs in this playground. And one of the girls is just like, can I swear on this podcast?
Of course.
Now you can.
Yeah, now I can. Okay, well, she says "fuck you" and punches him in the face, and I was like, I absolutely need to see this movie.
That was like amazing.
What I wish I had done as a kid. So, yeah, I'm definitely excited for that.
To give people one more thing to look forward to checking out this weekend, I think obviously it's the summer, so there are already 1,000 festivals going on. But if you want to get into your arts bag this weekend, you got plenty of opportunities. From Friday, there's an art pop-up at Hyde Park put on by Progression called Shea Baldwin. They're going to have merch, great art pieces. You can head over to Wrigleyville for the Southport Art Fest Saturday and Sunday. Or if you're over in Humboldt Park, the Barrio Arts Fest is going to be happening. So I think I'm going to get out in these streets this weekend and check out and pick up some local art between these three neighborhoods.
What kind of art are you looking for? Are you looking, because I've been to your apartment. You've got you've already got a ton of art on your walls. Like do you need like a do you need objects? What are you looking
posters,
for? But what are you looking for?
Nothing in particular. I'm going to probably grab some merch from Progression for sure. And then usually I try to grab things that I can carry. And so like something like a little tabletop piece, like a little piece of like a little painting. So if I could bring back something I can like put like on like a little shelf or something. So I'm nothing in particular, but something handheld that it's easy to carry.
Portable, I like it.
Mm-hmm. Nothing too big.
That's why I go for the jewelry. I'm always in for the street fest jewelry. Like that is my vibe.
I'm always down to grab merch that I can wear immediately. So like I'll pick up a sun hat or like some random glasses or something.
Some wearable art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm all for it. Well, I want to thank both of y'all for joining me on this amazing Friday to look back on some key stories from the week. Shout out to WBEZ's higher ed reporter Lisa Phillip and our lead producer Simone Alisea. Thank y'all so much for making time.
Hey, thanks for having me. That was a blast.
Before I let you go, I want to give a huge shout out to the rest of the CityCast Chicago team, including producer Grant Irving, our newsletter editor Sydney Madden, our roving newsletter editor this week Natalia Aldana, the music we all love from Sam Thousand, all the kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. If you love CityCast Chicago nearly as much as I do, please share with your friends and family and rate and review the podcast wherever you can. I'm going to talk to you bright and early on Monday. In the meantime, in between time, head over to chicago.citycast.fm and subscribe to the best damn newsletter in the business, Hey Chicago. If you already subscribe, just stick around the website and read a little bit. I'll talk to you on Monday. Peace. Hey, Stephanie has been getting roles after roles. Was killing it in Marvelous Miss Maisel.
Yes,
killed it in was it everywhere? Everything, everywhere, all at once. Yeah.
We're all trying to say it at the same time.
Yes.
Every square, every circle, all of the time.